And now, the cloud. You know, they said reality in the cloud, and I walked outside and everyone said, yeah, the cloud's right here. So weather's still holding up, but the cloud, how cloudy are we out here? That's what we're going to talk about. What does it mean for this part of the world? What does it mean globally? What does it mean for how we look at technology, information and communications technology? I would like to introduce my panel without further ado. First, please join me in welcoming Mr. Walid Abu-Hadba, Corporate Vice President of Microsoft's Developer and Platform Evangelism Group, the DPE Group. Walid, please. Now, Walid leads efforts at Microsoft to build vibrant solutions ecosystems through evangelism, community engagement, and audience marketing. He is the Microsoft cloud man, if you will. Can we say that?
That's okay.
Cloud man? Okay. And he has been with Microsoft since 1991 and has led various initiatives in various areas globally within Microsoft. Second of all, I'm honored to introduce Mr. Mohammed Amin, Vice President and General Manager of the Middle East and Northwest, East Central Africa and Turkey at EMC. Thank you. Mr. Mohammed Amin. As you know, EMC is one of the leading technology infrastructure firms globally and works with its clients to develop all kinds of storage solutions, data protection solutions, security solutions, and we'll be talking to him at length. Mr. Sachin Dugal, CEO of Niveo. I don't know how to introduce Sachin because I don't know where to start. Sachin, at the age of 15, was an entrepreneur. He founded SMX Corporation along with a friend, and this went through various iterations from building PCs to virtual hosting to software development. And then he worked for the United Nations and wrote the Declaration of Youth Rights before he completed his first degree from Imperial College at age 17, joining Deutsche Bank as their youngest employee, and then built systems to generate tens of millions of dollars for the bank. In 2004, Sachin co-founded Niveo with a view to explore all kinds of new internet technologies, and now it has manifested itself in cloud computing models targeting various sectors, including education and SMEs. So, Sachin, great to have you with us. Next, I have Mr. Robert Fogel from Intel. He is the Principal Education Architect of Intel's World Ahead program and Vice President of the Open Grid Forum. Robert Fogel. The World Ahead program at Intel is focusing on reaching the next billion users with broadband internet connectivity, state-of-the-art computer technology, collaborative rich media content, and interactive one-to-one education environments. He's also the Vice President of the Open Grid Forum, which is a community handling the effort for broad-scale adoption of grid technology, which is really the old name for the cloud. And last but not least, of course, our distinguished keynote speaker, Dr. Werner Vogels, Chief Technology Officer and Vice President of Amazon.com. Okay. Without sounding like a meteorologist, we're going to talk about the cloud, gentlemen. Let's start with Walid. What is the cloud for the uninitiated, and what does it mean?
First of all, thank you very much for the invitation, and thank you for being here. And I really wanted to congratulate you on a great and a very successful event here. This is world-class, and it really exceeded all my expectation, my team's expectation here. Let's talk about a little bit about the cloud. You know, I just want to give you a little bit of a history about computing in general. We all know about the computing history, but I just want to take you through the major transformation in the world of computing since the beginning of mainframe. So we had a mainframe, and then we go from the mainframe to basically the PC revolution. And that was a massive transformation where the mainframe was very limited access to people into it, and then the PC came in, and there was an explosion of computing models, and people have been using the PC. But the PC model was for the information worker. It was not really for consumers. But the transformation, a whole new industry was generated with that kind of computing model. Then we came into what we call basically the GUI interface. That's when we started the revolution of going from character-based to GUI-based. And there was a whole new industry spun off in that environment, a whole new computing model. And the other transformation occurred is where we have the web came in around 1994, 95, and then client-server computing came in the middle. Now we are going through another type of transformation of the industry. This is, in my opinion, in Microsoft's opinion, larger than any transformation we've been through. This is allowing people to have compute on demand. It allowing all aspects of the society, all aspects of customers, consumers, enterprises, large and small, to have elastic demand of computing without having to have the outlay of capital that is going in there. That will revolutionize the world. Let me give you just a statistic. Today, there is roughly 40 million servers in the world. I mean, you count everything. You count mainframes, you count servers and data centers, roughly about 40 million. 30 million of those run in Microsoft technologies. Our hypothesis in Microsoft, that number with cloud computing will explode to an enormous number in the foreseeable future, in the next 5 to 10 years. I can't even put a number on it. People ask me several times, is it going to be 1 billion servers or 2 billion servers? We don't even know how much that will be, but I could tell you it will be orders of magnitude than what it is today. And it will allow people full access to it. So cloud is simple. It's a new computing model that allows individuals, consumers, entities, enterprises of all sizes, governments, to access computing on demand that they did not have access to before, before this revolution.
Let's kind of take this a little further and talk about what's happening in terms of research and development. Could you tell us a bit more about, from your perspective at Microsoft, what's happening with the cloud from a research and development standpoint?
Let me give you just another data point. In Microsoft, roughly our R&D budget is about $9.5 billion last fiscal year. That is what we spend in R&D. It's the largest R&D spent in the world of any industry. 90% of that R&D is in cloud computing. 90% of that R&D, so it's well over about $8.5 billion of R&D in Microsoft around cloud computing. So when Microsoft bets, we bet big. I mean, we're betting the company on that kind of a revolution, and we think it's going to happen. I don't think it's a matter, we're living it right now, and it's going to happen and materialize.
Thank you for that, and I'm going to move to Mohammed Amin from EMC. Tell us a little bit about, are organizations afraid of the cloud from what you're seeing, from your dealings in the region? Are organizations in the MENA region still not clued in on what the cloud means for them, what they can do with it, and how can they start, and how can they prepare for a cloud computing model in this region?
Okay, it's a pleasure to be with all of you here. It's a very lovely place. So I would like to expand a little bit on what my colleague from Microsoft said, and I'll take it from there, because I agree with him completely. But I like to go one step backwards here and say why everyone is talking about the cloud right now. Why all of a sudden everyone talking about cloud? Because with the digital growth, with the information growth, which we're having in the whole world right now, to give you some statistics here, 100 million users are on Facebook today. Those people creating information. Last summer, 78 million cell phones were sold in the Middle East. So if we keep doing, and my colleague talked about 40 million servers, which is only we're using 10% of the capacity of that 40 million servers. We have today in the world 1 billion BC. The statistics saying in 2013 is going to be 2 billion BCs around the world. So if you look for all of this, if we keep doing things in the new approach, things will get much better, because if we kept doing the way we're doing today, in 5 years from today, the whole world will never find the capacity to manage those information. Today, back to your question about the organization, if you talk to any IT manager, any CIO, you'll find his IT budget splits into two. 72% to maintain what he has already, to maintain the infrastructure which he has. And I travel a lot, I see so many data centers. Is not the most elegant data center you can ever see. That means 28% only of the money he gets every year, only to do new things, new initiatives, to be competitive, to serve his own business. So imagine if you go for the cloud and do things better, federate between resources and infrastructure, talking about software as a service, talking about infrastructure as a service, talking about on-demand payment. This will give every IT manager the statistics saying we're gonna reduce this down to 45% to maintain what he has, and 55% to do new initiatives, not necessarily in IT only, but around his organization to make himself competitive. If you zoom into the Middle East here, most of the organization today, what we're telling them, private cloud is a journey, everyone at certain stage of the journey. So we're advising them, you have to look for your infrastructure, you understand in 5 years what is the challenges your organization and this part of the world gonna meet, and you make yourself ready and your infrastructure ready to meet other private cloud to create the whole cloud. So basically, we are not gonna be able, everyone in his enterprise, to build everything and have a resources and application for everything, and that's gonna push all the organization to federate between different resources and to share each other resources. So every organization in the Middle East aware about this right now. I'm talking about the enterprise, and they are ready to move the journey, and they are ready to make themselves very ready in 5 years from today.
What does it mean for you to have a public cloud and a private cloud? Is the public cloud just going to be a series of private clouds connected to each other? And if so, you know, how can these organizations maintain some flexibility between their data center, their private cloud, and then what eventually becomes the public cloud?
Sure. Today, your private cloud is your data center, which we know today, okay? The only thing, how you make it ready for the future and how you use the resources of your own data center. So you have to build your own data center, so it's a just different name. We're talking about the private cloud. Public cloud, it's a cloud which all of us should use the resources. To give you some example, Google and Amazon today, more or less, is a public cloud. So eventually, all the small private clouds, along with some public clouds, will come together as a large cloud, which we share all the resources on it.
And honestly, how ready is our region for cloud computing? From an infrastructure standpoint, because you're involved in infrastructure, I'm going to ask you this. How ready is our region for cloud computing? And which countries are leading the way in that regard? And what more can we do?
To be very frank, there is no one size fits all. There is some organizations are halfway through the journey and some organizations are not ready at all. And actually, EMC, we transformed ourselves in the previous few years from a pure storage infrastructure to IT information management, and we acquired some major company in applications. So when I look for application level, I found the picture is not that pretty yet. So I believe that our region still has to invest a lot, whether in private sector, whether in telecom or banks, or even in the government level, to get ourselves to the next stage and next level. Having said that, I can see around the whole region, and I'm not saying because I'm in Jordan, I see some very, very good initiatives from several governments, Jordan one of them, how to take the whole country to meet the standard in the futures. So I would say we still have, we're in the beginning of the journey. I have to be very frank, we're not ready, but most of the people I'm talking to, they know the importance of what we're talking about, and they're having the right mentality, the right approach, the right initiatives to make themselves ready.
Great. Thank you, Mohammed. I'm going to move now to Sachin Dugal, CEO of Niveo. Sachin, you have had some experience now in creating a business that is going to try to make money from cloud computing as a provider. How is this going to work?
So that's a really interesting one. And not to go over another definition of cloud, but when we started Niveo, we have a slightly different view of looking at cloud. So we look at it by not looking at the technology, because we think a lot of early stage, or actually anything that's ever developed in IT, is sold to corporations or large enterprises, and their people understand technology. We think the biggest benefactors of the cloud is the SME, the consumer, and the student or the child. And for them, they don't understand switches, chips, RAM, they're not really interested. And the model that we've tried to use before to explain it is the analogy to electricity. There was a time in history where we all had generators. And we focused about the brand of the generator, how good it looked, how many RPMs, how efficient it was with fuel. And then it became a supply. And what we did is we completely stopped worrying about everything related to it except the consumable, which was the power itself. And if we think of what the cloud is doing, today we have a computer, it has RAM, memory, chips, motherboards, and so on and so forth. But we get so focused on that capital item that we forget about the ultimate consumable, which is content or software. And actually, in a lot of places in the world, you don't get pirated hardware, but you get pirated software, which is quite funny because software is the ultimate thing that people are consuming. So in our world, we said, well, we think software, considering it changes every 16 to 18 months, the average release of Microsoft Office from our distinguished friend is about 14 to 16 months. By about 24 months, early adopters take it. 36 months, it's mainstream. 48 months, if you don't have the latest version, you're pretty much in trouble because you won't be able to open it. And that's actually common for everyone. So we said, okay, well, content and software is the same thing. It should be rented. Then we said, okay, so that's great. So we're going to rent software and content to people. When we started the business, we had a very clear vision. We're going to solve a problem. We're not just going to be an arbitrage business. And we realized that the biggest way you're going to make a change in the world, and I think this was a session before that Haif was moderating, is around education. So we set out with this grand vision in college that we're going to educate 100 million kids before we die. Whether we achieve it or not is a separate goal. We're trying our best. And we said, but we need to do this on a for-profit side. And so ultimately, we came up with 4 potential use cases for the cloud. We came up with the yet connected. This could be the child in Jordan. This could be the housewife. This could be the new small business that is trying to get online. They basically don't have the ability to consume software or content. They may not have a smartphone. They definitely won't have a PC. So we created an environment that allowed them, through a set of device partnerships with friends like Intel and Microsoft, that allowed them to get to a low-cost device where a lot of the hard work was done in the cloud. And the analogy here is that we believe there are enough PCs in the world that exist today, if you time slice them properly and put them in the right locations in the world, to supply pretty much most of the world's compute power requirement. Because an average PC is used 6 hours a day, it's used for 30%. If you do the maths, you realize that a PC could actually serve 12.5 people. Then you look at the number of PCs that exist in different shapes and sizes, everything from a Pentium 100 onwards. And if you then bridge that in with the cloud, you actually have enough devices that exist. Our second set of users were people that were stuck in this upgrade cycle. And what unfortunately the tech industry has done is forced everyone into this upgrade cycle. Every 12 months, 24 months, 36 months. So we said, hey, these guys should be able to use the power of the cloud and not have to change their hardware. Our third user was a new category, what I call the iPad and tablet lovers, that came out of nowhere. And in the last 6 months, if you don't have an iPad, or in the foreseeable future you don't have a tablet, it's just not the cool thing. And what you're seeing is governments like India making jumps ahead of the PC curve and saying, well, you know what, we're not going to produce a low-cost PC, we're going to produce a $35 tablet. I'm hoping that it happens in the next 12 to 24 months. But what you're seeing is a category change. Now, this category change works on some really fundamentals. It works on the basis that the device will be low cost. It won't necessarily need to be upgraded. It'll work on the basis that the compute power or the consumable will happen in the internet somewhere. And that's ultimately what the cloud is. And so that's another really important use case for us as a business. And let's not forget the guys that have the latest PCs running the latest version of Windows. They're fed up of buying software. And they're fed up of paying for content. So we come back to our very simple mission. We changed it and we said, we will rent software and content to anyone with and without a Windows PC. So if you're on a Mac, you can now get all the Windows software that you want. But ultimately, we're really heavily focused about this population, which is in the billions, that is yet to be connected.
But the cloud is not only for big firms, it's for everybody.
I completely agree with you. The cloud actually is not really meant for big firms, if you ask me off the record. Very difficult with sitting with about 300 people in front of me. The cloud to me has the ability to make change at a far more of a grassroots, educational, yet connected, small business level. Because ultimately, let's think about this whole private-public cloud notion. The private cloud has existed for decades. For the last 10, 12 years, what we call the private cloud is actually just virtualization. It's the use of commoditized hardware with a really nice hypervisor that allows you to run multiple logical machines on a physical machine. So there's nothing new there. But does that allow your kid to be able to get access to a PC? We're doing some early work with the JEI, which we're already seeing the benefits of the cloud. Does it allow small businesses to become far more operationally focused on their actual core business and not IT? Because there is a tipping point that when you get to 50 seats, you need an IT manager. We have use cases of businesses running 75 people that don't have an IT manager. In fact, the office secretary manages their entire PC network because it's all hosted. So we're seeing this rechange in the model. And I actually I think for a large enterprise, all you're doing is moving the cost. You're moving the cost, you're getting some benefits of scalability, elasticity, all the good things that my learned friends have said. But I think the biggest benefactors, and Amazon's a great example of this. Look at every single Silicon Valley startup. If they're not using the Amazon cloud or S3 to host their data, every venture cap firm will ask them, what on earth are you guys doing trying to build storage? So if you look at North America and Europe, that is the default way that new companies can build. So you wouldn't have the Twitters and you wouldn't have half the web apps that exist today if it wasn't for people being able to use on-demand elastic supply.
Did you and Werner talk before the...
No.
All right. Okay, Robert Fogel from Intel. Talk to us about world ahead and tell us about some of the opportunities presented in the MENA region from your experience.
Okay, well, I'm pleased to be here. Thank you, Wajid.
Thank you.
And I spend most of my life traveling to countries all over the world, and I spend a lot of time working with government officials to help them apply technology for education, healthcare, small, medium business, business application, as well as for government services. And one of the things that I've observed and experienced is that there's an intense interest in this notion of cloud. And many of these governments want to know, what does that mean for them? And so what I tell them is I actually try to think of it from the perspective of the user. And from the perspective of the user, I contend that what the cloud represents to them is the ability to access services, anytime, anywhere services, from any device. And the whole concept of cloud is the idea that these services are just kind of out there somewhere. You don't care, from a user's perspective at least, you don't care where they are, how they're being accessed, where they're running. All you know is that here are the services that I need to do my job as a teacher in education, as a student, as a small, medium business owner, as a healthcare professional. The services are just there for me to access and use to do my job. And I think that we're doing a grave disservice to ourselves sometimes to complicate the concept of cloud and make it more than what it really is. But I think what ends up happening is it just can be simplified to the notion of defining what are the services that you're trying to deliver to these various sectors. And so what that does is present the opportunity for changing the way, for instance, we deliver education. We can think now of delivering education as a service. We can think of delivering healthcare as a service. And this greatly simplifies, at least from end users and decision makers, IT decision makers as well. It simplifies the notion of what it is that you're trying to do, and that is deliver services to end users. And then the next natural step in that process is then to, once you've determined what are the services I'm trying to deliver to my end users, then you ask yourself the question, what is the underlying infrastructure that I need to have in place in order to deliver these services? And again, this becomes a simplified way of thinking about how to apply the cloud concept and cloud technology in a very, very simple way. And what I see here in the MENA region specifically is actually a tremendous opportunity. I think that there are the kinds of resources that are necessary and are in place. I think the attitudes and interests are in place in order to effect a significant change in the way healthcare, education, government services are delivered. And I work with many countries in the Middle East and the MENA region. And there seems to be this opportunity to actually become leaders. And that's what I think ultimately the opportunity is to actually become leaders in how IT infrastructure and user services, cloud-based services, can be delivered.
Thanks, Robert. I want to move on to Werner here very quickly. Now, Werner, you spoke about this morning in your keynote, and you gave us some really interesting insights. And let's just kind of drill down and dig deeper, and let's start making a mess in the little sandbox over here, and talk about what kinds of concerns can arise when trying to implement cloud computing on a massive scale? How does it relate to, let's say, governments, or how does it relate to policymaking in your view? And how will it impact other organizations in other sectors and other industries, looking out from where you stand at Amazon?
Okay, so there's two sides to that. One side is the concern side, which I think with every new technology, or certainly technology that is, I wouldn't even call cloud computing necessarily a technology, but an approach to managing your IT resources. So there's one side in being cautious and being, investigating that you actually, the new services that you're going to be using are actually meeting what you're looking for. Yeah? And so that's, and I think in that sense, the due diligence around cloud computing is not different from with any other technology that you would want to use, or whether you want to engage in outsourcing, whether it's outsourcing development or outsourcing applications, as that we've done for many, many years. I've recently meet more and more companies that have almost for 100% outsourced all of their technology for a very long time already, and for whom cloud computing actually is something that they gain more control over their environment instead of less control. But the notion of control is indeed one thing. If you have everything in your own data center, if you have everything in your server room, in the back of your company, then you have a feeling as if you have more control over it. In the kind of services that Amazon delivers, which is infrastructure as a service, customers hand over some level of control. On the other hand, they get a lot in return for it. So all of these things become, what are the best practices around it? How should I approach this? What kind of analysis do I do on the applications that I have? Which applications are suitable and which not? And indeed, we hear most of the stories are about new companies all starting in the cloud and things like that. Most of these concerns come from companies that are existing businesses. But if I look at a large enterprise, I mean, a CIO may be responsible, what is it, for somewhere between 2,000 and 4,000 applications. He's not going to move those 4,000 applications overnight in the cloud. And the cloud is also not something that is all or nothing. If you're able to find one application in your whole set of applications for which the cloud is not a good solution, it doesn't mean that there isn't 15 other applications for which it's the right thing to do. Yeah? If you look at how marketing campaigns have changed. Marketing campaigns used to be a website and a bit of video. Now a marketing campaign is a very big website, streaming video, user-generated content, casual gaming, integration into Facebook, and all experience some form of exponential event for which you need 5,000 servers, if you want to do it right. Yeah? And that's not only small companies that get exposed to that, it's large companies as well. I think there's a big move within enterprises as well to collect more and more and more data and do analysis on that kind of data. Yeah, and for that, you need massive amounts of compute power to be able to do that for you. All of those are easy use cases. There's low-hanging fruit for things that can move to the cloud. One point that I want to make about governments is that governments have always been, their primary concern always has been to protect their citizens. So I think privacy concerns have always been number one. And maybe the US is not necessarily that well known for them. I'm a European myself, so I have a better feel for exactly how governments want to approach this and the kind of things that are happening. But I also see that governments want to break the cycle of you have a good idea and it takes you 4 years to deliver on that idea. Yeah, governments want to move to the same operating cycle as that web companies operate on. You have an idea, 6 months later your citizens should be able to benefit from that idea. Instead it needs to become a massive enterprise engineering project with procurement cycles that take 9 months and more of those kind of things. Yeah? No, governments have to become more agile as well and more direct facing towards their citizens. And for that, cloud computing is an ideal tool to use. Mm-hmm.
Great stuff, thank you. Okay, so with all of this discussion going on, there are a lot of things to think about, so please start prepping your questions while we do our next voting question. So why don't you get your voting devices ready to go, and we'll ask a question. And in all likelihood, some of you will recognize this may be a trick question of sorts. Because it's asking, is your organization considering using or developing cloud-based computing services? If you're a software developer, if you provide certain kinds of services, are you considering using or developing cloud-based computing services? Yes, in the next 6 to 12 months. Yes, in the next 3 to 5 years. No, cloud computing is not going to work for us. No, we're not sure what cloud computing is anyway. Be honest, because there probably is no right answer to this question.
Oh yes, there is a right answer.
Well, there is. Don't give it away.
I think you owe it to your shareholders to explain them. If you say no, you owe it to your shareholders or your board to explain why you are still investing in things that actually do not differentiate you from your competition.
That is the question of the day. Can someone tweet that real quick? And just as a reminder, you can, of course, keep following us on hashtag MENAICT. And it's pretty busy out there in the Twitter sphere. So we have 46% of people saying yes in the next 6 to 12 months. And that's because they were paying good attention to Werner, who said you are already in the cloud and you're already using the cloud. That means they were listening, Werner.
Actually, I was really surprised. So in my presentation this morning, I only mentioned 2 companies out of the region that were actually using our services. I walked up during the coffee break and about 10 people came to me and said, but we are also your customers. Yeah, and a good thing about the whole cloud model is that it's largely self-service and pay-as-you-go, so customers can use it without actually you really being aware that they're your customers. So there's a lot of you actually in the room that are already users.
Good stuff. Let's take some questions for our distinguished panelists. Can we get a microphone to the back over there? The gentleman right there, your hand up, yes? Which could be anyone. Yes. Yes, right there. Yep. To your left. Okay, in the meantime, let me just, to save time, let's just take the gentleman's question over here real quick.
Yes.
We'll hold on to that. Yes.
Dr. Zakaria Al-Khaja, a government authority, Kingdom of Bahrain. My question to the gentleman regarding the, I can see and note that there are good opportunities for adopting cloud computing in the region, exclusively for MENA. And I'm talking about certain kind of barriers to adopt such a new trend of computing, let's say. One of this barrier is considering the limitations of internet connections, the internet infrastructures. Now, gentlemen try to convince us to adopt the cloud computing with our mission critical applications, which is certainly, doesn't allow to stop such application for 1 second. And still, to be frank and honest here, still MENA area experiencing with the limitation of internet infrastructure, especially if you are experiencing from time to time damaging of marine cables. So just this is my concern. If a gentleman can, how would we be able to address this concern if we are relying totally into remote computing at the same time we have some limitation with the internet infrastructure? Thank you.
Robert, would you like to jump in?
I think that it's wrong to assume that cloud equals internet or online. I actually think that's a limitation that doesn't allow you to really take advantage of the full power of cloud and the concept of cloud. I think what has to happen is that when you think about the services you're trying to deliver that run anywhere, anytime, any place, is you want to think of those services as being able to operate in many different kinds of environments. And I think that environment is an occasionally connected environment. You can't always assume you have connectivity, but you always want to be able to get your job done. And just like email, the way email functions, and you're able to send emails on the plane. I know a lot of planes have connectivity, but nevertheless, generally speaking, you can't assume that you're always connected, so you need to be able to take advantage of these services no matter what environment you're in.
Walid, please.
We struggled with this. In Microsoft, we really had for the past 4 or 5 years, trying to understand, what does the cloud computing model going to mean into different scenarios. The scenarios you brought up is just a very, very perfect way of doing the scenarios. So Microsoft took a different approach, a little bit different approach. We believe that will going to be a public cloud. Amazon is a public cloud, it's a great one. Google is a public cloud, it's a great one. And Microsoft has a public cloud, and it's going to be a great one. But we also understand that the privacy, connected and disconnected states. For example, we know for sure governments are not going to put citizens' data in public clouds. That's something that governments already voted on. That's not actually open for a lot of debate in a lot of areas. We also understand that corporations, because of heritage, because of whatever reason there is, to move their data into a public cloud is going to be almost an impossible movement for them for the next, say, 10 years. Let's just talk about a 10-year window. Our approach was there will be a public cloud, there will be a private cloud, and there will be a government cloud. And our approach to in the Microsoft world is we're going to make, and actually with our partners, EMC is actually a very great partner, Intel is a great partner, and actually Amazon is also a phenomenal partner for Microsoft. Our approach to it is going to be, look, you need to decide as a customer at the end of the day. For us as vendors to decide for you, I think that's actually a recipe for failure. We know what happened with IBM when the mainframe occurred with the PC. They could not shift that environment very quickly. They owned both environments. They owned the mainframe and they owned the PC, but they couldn't shift their business priorities between the two platforms. We're not going to make that mistake. Otherwise, we'll lose a big company like Microsoft. So what we decided to do is to move into what we call, your choice of the cloud. The cloud is here to stay. There will be a cloud. Back to your comment, the cloud and the cloud computing is a model. It's not, where do you provision? So sometimes you decide as a customer that I want to consume the services from something called a public cloud, and you have choices. Sometimes you decide to build it within your own data center, and you use your own technologies or technologies from different vendors to build that. And sometimes you want to have a government cloud. The trick comes in is how do you actually interconnect them and make sure that the services to the end consumer and user is seamless. So people in the end users, when you have your handheld device or you have your iPads or you have your PCs or Windows PCs, you will be able to go ahead and consume the services without having to actually figure out which cloud you're sitting on that element. That is the approach. That's our R&D approach to solving the problem going in there. The other part of it is people recognize, or they think right now, and I heard this a lot, they think that the cloud equals thin devices. There will be a lot of dumb devices talking to this thing called internet and cloud. That's far from the truth. If you look at every new generation coming of devices right now, it has a tremendous amount of compute power. If you look at your iPad is a very compute-intensive environment. If you look at your phones, if you look at all the devices. So we have another term we call in Microsoft is that, the cloud loves the devices and devices love the cloud. And it's a very important element. It's a matter about choice of deployment. Again, it's choice of how you deploy your technology, not whether the cloud is going to be a reality or not. And that's a very critical, important differentiation for us around how we approach the cloud.
Thanks, Walid. Sachin, real quick.
So our kind of view, having worked in India, which is a very similar area, is that you have types of connectivity. And I think one is the bandwidth within a country, one is the bandwidth out of a country, and one is what we call government bandwidth. And let me kind of explain these three really quickly. So in-country bandwidth is the speed of the connection. 4 years ago, broadband in India was considered 256 kbps. Today, it's 2 megs. In the next 24 months, it'll probably go to 8 to 16 megs. So I think that's a problem with a very short half-life. Then you've got connectivity out of country, which is submarine cables being cut and so on and so forth. And that kind of links into what we call government bandwidth. As the cloud becomes to be adopted far more by a population, and a few have the ability to affect that population. Remember, when you're in a world that is just PCs, it takes a lot for 30% of the PCs in a country to get knocked out. When you're in a world that is all powered by the cloud, and there are only 6 or 10 vendors, one vendor goes down, you've lost 10% of the citizens are affected immediately. So the government starts stepping in terms of data jurisdiction, regulation. And in some respects, what we're seeing from our work with the World Economic Forum is a lot of governments are promoting the idea of regionalized centers. So you have data centers in region, and therefore you lose the problem of connectivity out of country, because generally connectivity within a region is fairly good. And if it's not fairly good, again, it's a very short half-life problem. because nothing is going to go all the way from Australia to the US every single time just because there's only one data center in the world, because it's going to be distributed. That's what the cloud promotes.
Let's take another question. Gentleman there has been waiting. Yes, sir. Could you please introduce yourself? And
Yes, my name is Khalid Hudhud. I work for a telecommunication company called Omnia, and I'm interested in what you think, being all in not telecommunication providers, what you think is the role of the telecom operators in providing cloud computing beyond being the pipe providers, and what do you think about the initiative of the telecommunication operators to try and make more money from providing the pipe so as to enable investments in second generation, third generation, fourth generation telecom networks that can carry such computing back and forth?
who wants to jump in first? Everybody wants in on this. Let me just go to Robert real quick and then Werner.
So I think that there's a huge opportunity for telcos, and traditionally when we think of building IT infrastructure, we likely employ the services of a systems integrator. And I think that the opportunity for telco is to, in some ways, replace the system integrator by being an integrator of services, a services integrator. And you can imagine a telco integrating these various services to not only aggregate services, but then to provide the aggregated services back out to its users.
Werner.
Well, that actually sounds really pretty good.
Oh, good enough?
No, I'm actually going to add something to it. I think customers, many telcos, especially the wireless telcos, have a very long-standing relationship with their customers. They know a lot of things about their customers. They know exactly what kind of services they can provide. And I think for a long time, or for the past 4 or 5 years, telcos have really tried to go through this transformation 2.0 phase, where they try to transform themselves from an old-style telco provider heading towards becoming a dumb pipe to a more intelligent provider of services. I think they're doing, sorry, and I'm going to insult a few people, they're doing an abysmal job there. I think if you ask people what are the most hated company you know, you can definitely say that many consumers will mention their wireless provider as their first company they hate. And they provide an abysmal service, and they provide an abysmal service at the same time, yet you try to squeeze more money out of your customers. That's a losing proposition. So I think what telcos really need to start engaging things in the cloud is also learning that the consumer is in control. There will be a moment in which you will lose control over that handset. And that the only way that you're going to survive in this world of abundant services is if you are going to deliver services that your customers really want at the quality and the reliability that they need.
Walid.
Just to be on the record, I love my telco provider.
You do?
Yeah, I do love my telco provider and wireless provider. Look, telcos are essential. I mean, in essence, actually, telcos were the original cloud operators. You know, think about it for a moment. Who provided the first services, compute services to the world? It's actually telcos. They were the provider of the original services. I think telcos are essential. And integrating the telcos into the cloud model is very, very essential to play in that. 3 things telcos need to do. 1, they need to make sure that they don't play into purely the infrastructure as a service model. The cloud is not about infrastructure as a service. The cloud is about infrastructure as a service, platform as a service, and application as a service. Those are the 3 elements of a cloud that are critical. Infrastructure as a service is going to be a commodity. And the commodity is going to be driven, the prices are going to be driven down into pure, you know, just very, very low price, and there will be going to be low margins. Things are going to happen at the higher end. Platform as a service is coming very strong. And then you go ahead and move that, and disk space and storage is actually more into the higher end space than just infrastructure space. Then you have application as a service. That is where telcos are brilliant. That is where they could do services that nobody else actually can do. In a lot of ways, and I'm responsible for the ISV ecosystem in Microsoft. In a lot of ways, I consider all telcos right now to be ISVs. And that is very important distinction for a company like Microsoft when we switch from treating a telco as a channel or as a customer, end customer, to treating them as an ISV. The end consumer services that are going to explode in the next 5 to 10 years, a big portion of that software written is going to be done by the telcos or going to be riding on the telcos infrastructures. And the telcos need to actually change some of their business models to figure that out. So that's number one. Number two, in new business models, telcos are brilliant at monetizing end consumers. Big companies like people sitting in here, except for Amazon, we're not actually necessarily as good as telcos at monetization of end consumer services. Telcos have a brilliant model, but the model has to change and figure out what that to do. Three, which is the most important part, is how do you play with the rest of the telcos and the rest of the cloud? Telcos have an obligation right now. Can they actually bring together the industry, or they could defragment the industry? Okay, because if you block, and we've seen all these kind of movements in the US about open spectrums and not, if things get defragmented in the marketplace, we are in trouble and things are not going to coalesce for a while. I believe it's going to coalesce at the end. It will just happen by sheer force. So these are the three forces that telcos have to play. And when I spend a lot of time with telcos, I actually don't spend a lot of time with the CEOs of telcos talking to them as a customer, but only talking to them about an ISV. And that's a very important distinction in the industry that's going forward.
Sachin.
So just to add a couple of points. So the way we see the cloud is no one will own it. It's an ecosystem, and that ecosystem is created by three players, or four actually. One is the telco, one is the OEM, one is the content owner, and then you have the aggregators, people like us. And everyone works together as one happy family. Because if they don't, you have no connectivity, the device is useless. If the ISV doesn't go into a rental or a services model, no one in the ecosystem makes money, so everything falls apart. So it's a very important fabric that stays together kind of cohesively. What's also important to notice is telcos only have three interests, from our understanding, and most of our go-to-market partners around the world are telco operators. They want stickiness, increase in average revenue per user, and new connections. So as a way to partner, what they're doing is they're making themselves into a sales and marketing organization. And in some places like the emerging markets, where it's a cash-driven economy, they're also the payment gateway. So we look at our telco partnerships as payment, sales, marketing. We don't obviously, slightly differently to Microsoft, don't look at them as an ISV. And so we work with them appropriately. And we've seen this huge change in the last 24 months where they've become reasonable in their expectation of margin. They've become reasonable in that they actually have to do sales and marketing, and it's not just putting a bill insert. And they've also become more reasonable in that selling to a small business or selling to a consumer requires tactile teams, tactile marketing that allows them to kind of engage with that customer audience.
Yes, please, Mr. Mohammed.
He's right, but he wants to take your profit away. So what I would like to add in here, okay, I'm more closer to my colleague from Microsoft, and I would like to add there will be no cloud without the telecom, because if you look for the telecom right now, two main things technically, the bandwidth, how we're going to interact together as a world, and more important than I've seen happening in this region in so many countries, how telco do outsourcing. That's a very, very important. And I've seen some telco already moving to offer some service over their outsourcing, so they're managing the whole IT for lots of small company happening in this region. I can quote so many countries, which is a telecom right now taking all the small to medium business and hosting this and started to create the fundamental of the cloud.
My demands of telcos are much more humble. I just want my connection, and I want it fast, and I want it cheap. So, all right. Let's take one more question because we have to now move on to the next part of the session. Yes, sir. In the back.
My name is Hari. I'm from On-Track Systems Limited, India. My question to the panelists is, are we going to see the emergence of new operating systems and new processes to suit cloud computing?
As the operating system guy sitting on this room is I think you're going to see an evolution of operating systems. I don't think it's a new operating systems. If you look at the Windows Azure as a platform going in there, you're going to see the operating systems take on a little bit different flavor. Take as an example, today, if you look at Windows Azure or Windows Server, it's bound to a particular machine. And you could cluster many machines together, and that's a great model for that. If you look at the way we are moving into the cloud, especially with our announcement with Windows Azure Container, it will allow everybody to actually daisy chain multiple machines and multiple containers together. The key to it all is about the application model. We talked a little bit before in the comment, and I want to get back to this question about, look, there is very few applications moved from the mainframe to the PC. Very few. Some, but very few. Very few applications moved from the pure PC to a web. Really, very small number of applications are going to move from traditional model today to the cloud. Keep in mind, I'm not talking about hosting, because moving your application, moving your container, moving your virtual machine to a cloud does not make it a cloud-aware application. It just makes it more hosted. It gets a lot of benefits. It gets a lot of scalability benefits. It gets a lot of manageability benefits. Great benefits, great cost benefits. Don't misunderstand me. But for an application to be a cloud-aware, it has to be written to a cloud fabric. You need to be able to understand how to fail over. You need to be able to understand how to scale that application. And that's a new set of APIs. That is what we call platform as a service. And that's the developers today need to actually go ahead and take that into account. I see a whole new industry. There will be an entire new industry with hundreds of billions of dollars and new players that we don't even know about today, and new big names that are going to emerge around applications in the cloud. Take as an example, perfect example, Salesforce.com. It's a pure cloud application. Microsoft Dynamics, CRM, it's all a cloud, fully cloud application. It does not rely on the current model, just packaging that in a VMware and pushing it into the cloud. So it is very important for us to distinguish between the three layers of the cloud: infrastructure as a service, platform as a service, and application as a service, and how we go ahead and scale those things into the future.
Good stuff. Well, I just have to stop for 1 second because Mr. Mohammed Amin has to catch a flight. So, Mohammed, thank you so much for being with us today. Appreciate it.
Thank you, guys.
And I'm sorry I do have to cut this session short because we still have more speakers to talk about the cloud. So I'm going to hand over to Scott very quickly. Thanks, Scott.